Joining us now, senior advisor to Donald J. Trump for President 2020. Lara Trump is with us. I know you're used to the attacks. More importantly, free health care, free housing. Oh, and Elizabeth Warren wants free daycare. We're going to have guaranteed healthy food, guaranteed pretty vacations, medical leave, all of that, even if you're unwilling to work.
Yeah, well, it's all so crazy, Sean. And what I think people need to realize when we're talking about socialism, it is essentially the government taking over, as you're explaining, almost every aspect of your life. And in America, that is not right. That is not who we are as a country. That's not what our country was founded on. These things are becoming incredibly mainstream within the Democrat Party, and it's going to be very hard for people to distance themselves from these come the 2020 election. I tend to think let them keep digging themselves in a hole, because the average American in this country, I think, sees how crazy these ideas are and how quickly this would bankrupt our country and lead us down a path much like Venezuela is right now, where, Sean, they're eating dog and cat food to survive. You see that they don't even have beds in their hospitals. They're in deplorable conditions. People are starving to death. That is not something that we want to see happen in the United States of America. People have to take socialism and anyone running on a socialist platform incredibly seriously.
How are they going to convince Americans that we're going to eliminate all fossil fuels, the cars we love to drive, the lifeblood of our economy? Every American's going to have to retrofit and remodel their home. Oh, cows are going away, no airplanes, and we're going to, what, have sailboats to Europe and high-speed trains to Australia and New Zealand?
It makes absolutely no sense. And when you actually get down to it and start to ask questions like this, I think oftentimes they really can't answer you. They say, well, we'll find the money for it. Well, who's paying for it, Sean? The reality is they want to tax 70 to 90% taxes on the American citizens. Think about that, what that would mean for everyone across this country. It is so crazy. It's never going to happen in this country.
I think what's happening, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, California. California lost 1 million people. They left the state. 13,000 businesses left the state in less than 10 years. They're all losing people in their states because they're leaving. Absolutely. Because of high taxes and burdensome regulation. If they do it nationwide, what do you think those people that have money are going to do? They're going to move their money and they're going to move themselves.
You got that right. Everybody in New York is moving to Florida. And guess what? If they try to do it in this country, people are moving out of the country. It is going to spell disaster. Absolutely.
Yeah, pretty scary. All right, Lara Trump, great to see you. Congrats on the baby. I hear the baby's running around, jumping all over the place.
Climbing on the sofa. He's into everything.
I know. The first walking stage is step, step, boom. Yeah. Scary. All right, good to see you.
Welcome back. We're staying on this breaking news. Venezuela's socialist dictatorship just shut down its maritime border, banning all air and trips by sea over the ocean to and from 3 Dutch Caribbean islands. This is Maduro's push to block emergency aid, including food, that the hundreds of thousands need in Venezuela. Juan Guaido, the interim president, is saying people are starving to death. We need that food. Now, here at home, despite the socialist collapse in Venezuela, Democrats pushing socialism for America. But Venezuelan Daniel DiMartino, he warns America, don't do it. Do not let socialism into this country. And watch what Daniel says when he warns about how Venezuelans were told that everything is a constitutional right.
Well, I hear exactly what I heard back in Venezuela from the same socialist regime that told us that everything was a right. Healthcare was a right, housing was a right, jobs were a right. But in reality, when everything is a right, according to the government, nothing really is. People are starving in Venezuela because policies such as the one that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in her Green New Deal, which in reality is just the Red New Deal, which is just a socialist wish list.
Right now, it's Center for American Experiment President John Hinderaker. John, your reaction?
Well, I think DiMartino is exactly correct. He's a very sharp 18-year-old boy, I believe he is, now going to college in the U.S. He talked about how socialism had destroyed his family, which was once prosperous, and reduced them to abject poverty. But what he did that was really interesting was linking those disastrous Venezuelan socialist policies to the Green New Deal that most of the Democratic presidential contenders have signed on to. And he's exactly right, because the real purpose of the so-called Green New Deal is not energy. The real purpose is to give power over every aspect of our economy and therefore every aspect of our lives to the federal government. It really is, as he said, the Red New Deal.
But if it's not working in Venezuela, why did the Democrats propose it here?
You got me, Liz. It's like that cartoon that you may have seen of the guy with the giant fork and the giant socket, and he's trying to stick the fork into the socket, and this other guy says, hey, that turned out badly for everybody else that tried it, and the guy with the fork says they weren't doing it right. You know, it's this never-ending faith that somehow, someday, socialism is going to work. It's basically historical ignorance, I think.
But to pay for it, they would have to raise taxes on the middle class and the lower income, the poor brackets too, right? That's the only way you could pay for everything they want.
Absolutely. They're talking about confiscating.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They're talking about confiscating the wealth of the rich and so on. There's not enough rich people. That doesn't pay the bills. It's even in Europe, where they haven't done anything like the socialist New Deal, Green New Deal. They understand that if you want to pay for expansive government services, you've got to tax the middle class, because that's where the money is. And that's exactly what would happen here if anybody ever actually tried to implement these crazy schemes.
Thank you, John Hinderaker. Great to see you.
We're here to proclaim a new day is coming in Latin America. It's coming.
President Trump sounding off in Venezuela during the speech in Miami, condemning socialism and calling for a peaceful transfer of power in Caracas. This while urging Venezuela's military to back the opposition leader Juan Guaido. Michael Waltz, a House Armed Service Committee member, joins us from Orlando. Sir, how are you? And welcome back to our program here. Pretty strong argument yesterday. What do you think is the next piece of this story in Venezuela? How do you get Maduro out? Because so far he has been resistant, Michael.
Well, I commend the president for a very strong speech. You know, number one, he's going after now the military. The assets of the military leaders that have sided with Maduro. These are assets that they've stolen from the Venezuela people and hidden offshore, so hit them in their pocketbook. Number two, I think he rightly called out Cuba's role. Cuban intelligence is propping up the Maduro regime. They get their the Cuban regime survives off of Venezuelan oil, and I think they could be in real trouble if Maduro falls. But then more broadly, Bill, he called out socialism. Socialism often starts with a lot of happy talk. We're seeing that here in the United States in our political system of taking care of everyone. But at the end of the day, in order to give so many free things to so many people, you have to take from someone else, and the ruling class ends up deciding winners and losers, from health care to education to energy to, across our entire economy. And pointing that out and the failures of socialism is obviously going to have a big play heading into 2020, as so many Democrats point to that as the way forward. Well, let's look at Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and so many other places where that's failed.
Okay, you mentioned Cuba a couple times there. Here's the Trump soundbite from yesterday. Guys, go ahead and roll this when he mentions that.
Maduro is not a Venezuelan patriot. He is a Cuban puppet. That's what he is. We seek a peaceful transition of power, but all options are open. If you choose this path, you will find no safe harbor, no easy exit, and no way out. You will lose everything.
So let's see where this goes, Michael. Two other stories I'm going to hit on quickly. This is a little-known story that many Americans would not be aware of, but we're holding about 150 French citizens in Syria who joined the fight on behalf of ISIS. It's described as at least 50 adults with 150 total. We are urging the French government to take these people back. And the French government saying we'll look at a case-by-case basis. This is pretty sticky. What's the resolution here?
Well, it's a huge problem. Look, we're overall, the Syrian Democratic Forces, our allies on the ground in Syria, are holding hundreds and hundreds of ISIS fighters. So this is one of the real issues that we have to solve before any type of American pullout. Look, at the end of the day, Bill, I think our allies absolutely need to share the burden from reconstruction to taking control of these prisoners. There have been attacks all over Europe, so they have a real stake in fixing the problem in Syria. But America has to lead, and only American military can really lead on these problems. I'm not talking hundreds of thousands of troops. I'm talking a small footprint until these problems are resolved, because ISIS can come back. They will come back. And if we have to fight our way back in there to handle these problems, it's going to be much more costly than maintaining a presence, a small presence going forward.
We're going to watch it. There are hundreds of ISIS militants now in custody here, and we'll see what comes of them. What about this American woman? She gave birth, 18-month-old son. She wants to come home. You mentioned this. Well, we mentioned the story a moment ago. She gave an interview with The Guardian. What comes of her?
Well, I think there needs to be consequences. Look, you go over there to join, even if you're providing just support, a terrorist organization that is massacring civilians, that is launching attacks all over Europe, that's inspiring attacks in the United States. One way or another, directly or indirectly, you have blood on your hands. I think there needs to be real consequences for anybody who supports a terrorist organization overseas, period.
Would you take her home? What happens? Would there be a trial?
Well, I think I think there needs to be a trial. I think there needs to be justice, and I think there needs to be consequences. If she comes back here, she needs to be entered into the American judicial system for material support to a terrorist organization. And I hope that's what we see play out.
Okay. Congressman, thank you. Michael Waltz there in Florida today, out of Orlando. Thank you, sir.